Good morning. Cornerstone, it is wonderful to be with you. My name is Aaron. I like to refer to myself as the pastor of shenanigans and awkwardness, so you'll spend some time with me together. I'm excited to be with you today. And we are in the midst of a new series. Last week, Gene kicked us off with this series of ancient wisdom. Over the years, we've done 2 different times. We've done ancient words and looking at these ancient Hebrew and some Greek words and how they impact our lives. But now we're digging into to ancient wisdom and these concepts in which shape us, in which the Hebrews and the individuals that grace the pages of the Bible, that they would adhere to this and how they can shape our lives. Last week, Gene talked about Lech Lecha, which the idea that as God speaks to Abraham and says, take yourself and go, he is saying, find yourself who you really are and the journey that you were to be on. And now I have the opportunity to continue in this series, and the word that I have is Shevirah or Shevirah. And this word means brokenness. The more aggressive or more literal translation is shattered. And the definition of this, as the Hebrews believed that this ancient wisdom is an invitation to embrace imperfection. In doing so, we make room for both the joys and the sorrows of life, and understanding that we are shaped by our struggles as well as our successes. And I believe that today, not that in my life and in all of our lives, this is an incredibly important piece of wisdom. Shevirah, brokenness, shatterness, because we live in a world in which 2 opposing things are beginning to happen. We live in a world that we look around and we see brokenness and imperfection. Can I get a witness on that? Would you agree to that? But the other thing is, there is this drive like never before for optimization, for perfection, for people to look, act, and be flawless. How many of you in your job that it is actually your job to optimize things to the best of their ability, and that perfection is actually the measurable goal of your job? Does anybody have that? That's what your employer says. Be perfect. Do this the best that possibly can. And once you do it the best you possibly can, find an even better way to do that. That's exhausting, isn't it? To live in a world that you look around and everywhere you look, you see the beauty of brokenness and imperfection. But there is this internal drive to continue to be perfect, to optimize things, to make that which is really good even better. And once it's better than that, make it better again. And it's exhausting. And in these times where, I don't know about you, but many people are absolutely exhausted because they're tired of trying to look and be flawless in a world that is flawed, the ancient wisdom of Shevirah comes in and says, embrace imperfection. That there is a beauty in brokenness. That there is a beauty in things that are shattered. And that the Lord will use that. Will you pray with me? Well, Lord, today's a bit of an adventure. In the midst of my absolute imperfection, may you make something beautiful. And may you do what only you can do, Lord. I pray that you open our eyes and our ears and our hearts to the beauty of Shevirah. That you are a God who wastes nothing, creates a bond, and welcomes us to redemption. Thank you, Lord. Do what only you can do. Amen. The origins of Shevirah find their foundation at the bottom of Mount Sinai. Within the story, Moses has been invited in Exodus 1. The Israelites have left the captivity of Egypt. They're wandering through the wilderness, and they're going from place to place. And there comes a time when the Lord says to Moses, Moses, come on up. It's now time for us to ratify, to solidify the covenant between me and the people of Israel. And so Moses gathers the elders, and they head up to a stage. And then the Lord says, tell them to stay there. and he heads up on the mountain. And the Lord and Moses begin to have conversations. They're actually making plans. The Lord says, Moses, this is what I want the tabernacle to be like. This is what I want the Ark of the Covenant to be like. This is what I even want Aaron's clothes to be like. This is my covenant with you, and this is your covenant with me, and it's going to be absolutely beautiful. And God is speaking to Moses, and Moses is speaking to God, and there is this beautiful thing that is happening on Mount Sinai, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's wonderful. And all of a sudden, the Lord gives Moses something. He takes these stone tablets and he hands them to Moses. And these stone tablets have the commandments. This is like the marriage certificate in many ways. This is the laws. This is the relationship. This is what's going to hold us together. And he writes these covenant down. This is the rules and the guidelines for a covenant. And he gives them to Moses. And one of the beautiful things that we see in Exodus 31:18, when the Lord finished speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai, he gave him the 2 tablets of the covenant law, the tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God. Picture this for a moment. The Almighty God who spoke and there was light and there is life, the Almighty God takes stone tablets, he carves them himself, and he writes on them and he gives them to Moses. That's a pretty precious possession, wouldn't you say? God crafts these things, and he gives them to Moses. And after handing them to Moses, the scene begins to shift very quickly from something that is incredible and exciting to something that is tragic. The camera pans in the story, and it moves from Exodus 31, and it moves into Exodus 32, and no longer are we seeing what's going on Mount Sinai, but the camera pans in the story, and we begin to see what's down in the valley. And what's going on in the valley is not so great. The Israelites have been nervous. And because they've been nervous, they go to Aaron, they say, hey, you know your brother, the one who brought us out of Egypt? He's been gone for over a month. Do you think God ate him? Do you think that he's gone forever? And they begin to get nervous. And they say, Aaron, do something for us. And so Aaron's like, what should I do? What should I do? Maybe we should wait a little longer. I know. Everybody bring me your gold. And so they bring him all his gold, and he takes it, and he burns it, and he begins to fashion a golden calf. And he takes the golden calf in front of the people, and he says, here, Israel, here's the God that brought you out of Egypt. And they begin to worship that image. And it is this thing that is absolute tragedy, because what had just happened is this is basically the honeymoon period between God and Israel. God has just said, I'm marrying myself to you guys. You're my beloved. And on the honeymoon night between God and Israel, Israel sleeps with someone else. Does that make sense? That is the degree of the betrayal in which Israel has done. The marriage license, the ink is not even dry yet. And the bride has already gone off to be with someone else. And so Israel has absolutely shattered their relationship with God, and they're worshiping this golden calf. And Aaron's looking, going, probably not the greatest idea, but I at least got them off my back. And there's all this noise, and the Lord says to Moses up on the mountain, after giving him, he just gave him the 10 commandments, that he wrote himself, and he hands them to Moses. He's like, hey, Moses, here's my word, bad news for you. Things are in shambles. You better get down there because your people have already betrayed me. Moses goes down the mountain. They begin to hear the sound, and they think there's a war that's going on, and it's the people reveling and dancing and worshiping before this golden calf. Now, for many, many years, I looked at Israel and going, you fools, why would you do such a thing? But as I was studying this week, one of the things that I thought about was going, this is a people with attachment issues. They've been in captivity for 420 years. They finally get out, and now the leader that brought them out is gone for over a month and a half. And they fall into their worst behavior. And they just want to worship something that's in front of them, even though it's fake. And Moses comes down the mountain and he sees what's going on. And he sees that they're worshiping this calf and there's all of these things that are going on. And that the people, it says, have broken loose and they're making a fool of themselves in front of their enemies and in front of each other. And Moses gets down there and in his rage, he takes the very word that God crafted and he shatters it on the rocks and he throws it down. And then he goes over to the golden calf and he boils it down and pours the powder on the water and makes the people drink it. Drink your sin. It's like teaching a kid not to smoke by giving them a whole pack of cigarettes in their mouth. It's like, oh, you want to smoke? Here you go. Have them all. That might not be that funny, but never mind. And Moses is going through and he's giving the people, he is telling them how terrible what they have done. And there is this tragedy that happens with the killing of 3,000 of the Israelite people. And it is a mess. And the relationship between God and humanity, between Moses and the people, it's absolutely shattered. This is not a perfect scene, is it? This scene is absolutely in the midst of shattered. And it is broken. And Moses looks at the people and he begins to hand out a whole bunch of punishments. God heaps on one of the plagues. It says that God pours out a plague. Now, Israel would know the plagues, but the last time they saw the plagues, it was on Egypt. And now the plagues are on them. And God pours out a plague. And in the midst of the shattering of the relationship with God, the shattering of Moses' relationship with the people, and the shattering of these precious tablets, Moses says, I got to go talk to God. Let me see if I can do anything to do that. Let me see if I can do anything. Because this looks like it's beyond hope. Because the last thing God said was, get out of here. Leave. Leave this mountain. The last time God told someone to leave a place was Adam and Eve in the garden. Get out of here. Away from me. And Moses says, listen, maybe I can go do something about this. And he begins to speak to the Lord, and they begin to have this conversation. And he begins to talk to God in such a beautiful way. Amongst the shattered pieces of the tablets, he says to God, God, I got to be honest with you. You got me into this. This is not my issue. You got me into this. And if you have found favor with me at all, will you please not withdraw your presence? Will you please not just send us into the land that you've promised because you are a God of your word, but will you please, if you have found favor with me, will you please go with us? Because if you don't go with us, we're absolutely no one. So within the pile of the shards of the broken tablets, Moses is still saying, I don't know if this can be fixed, but we are nothing if you don't go with us. And the Lord says, okay. Okay, because I have found favor with you, I will go with you. And I will not leave you. I will be the one who is with you. And Moses says to him, Lord, please show me your glory. And there's something powerful that begins to happen here. The Lord says, all right. And this is the beauty of imperfection. That the Lord says in Exodus 34, 1 through 3. He says, chisel out 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and I will write on them the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. Be ready in the morning, and then come up to Mount Sinai. Present yourselves to me there on top of the mountain. I love this part. No one is to come with you or be seen anywhere on the mountain. Like, I'm serious. Not even flocks and herds may graze in front of the mountain. Just you, because we need to talk. And the Lord says to him, carve out 2 new stone tablets and bring an ark. Bring a box in which you can put them to. I love that little piece because it's kind of like, put it in a case this time. Come on. These are valuable. It's like when you get a new phone and you see someone with a new phone and they're walking with no case. They're like, are you crazy? Do you know how easy those break? The Lord's like, please get a case. I don't know if they had, this is like the ancient OtterBox, like put it in at least a case. And so he takes those stone tablets, and Moses has to carve them this time. The last time they were carved by God, and this time they're carved by man. And he takes them. In Deuteronomy, it says the same thing. Moses is just repeating, and he says, he chiseled out 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and come to me on the mountain, also make a wooden ark. And God says to him, I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. Then you are to put them in the ark. And Moses does exactly what he says, and he heads up on the mountain. And God takes those stone tablets that Moses had broke the first set that God made, and he takes the stone tablets that Moses chiseled out. I wonder if God's like, decent handiwork, but mine was a little nicer, but we can deal with this. And the God of the universe writes on those his covenant and his lost, his people again. And then he declares this. In Exodus 34:10, then the Lord said, I am making a covenant with you. Before all people, I will do wonders never before done in any nation in all the world. The people you live among will see how awesome is the work that I, the Lord, will do for you. God says this after the absolute shattering of the relationship between God and humanity, between Moses, almost and God, between Moses and the people. Amongst the broken pieces of the tablets, God stands up with the new tablets and he says, I'm going to do amazing, wonderful things. But one of the most profound things as I read this week comes from the Talmud, that the ancient Jewish writers believed, and they wrote, and it was commonplace to believe, that when Moses went up on Mount Sinai with the new tablets that were clear, he gathered up the pieces of the old tablet that was broken, and he put them in the ark, and he carried them with him up the mountain. And that when Israel would go from that place, that within the Ark of the Covenant, and we know that the Ark of the Covenant would be a place in which God would sit on the mercy seat between the cherubim, that under the seat of God was the broken tablets that were shattered at the base of Mount Sinai, along with the whole tablets that were rewritten by God. I think that's amazing, isn't it? That God would make something that is perfect and holy, that it would be shattered and broken, yet it would be kept as sacred and holy alongside something that is whole. I just want to pause for a moment, because I can't say it any other way other than that's incredible. That Israel would carry around the broken tablets alongside the whole tablets in the most important place in the heart of the Ark of Covenant, that would be the place that God would sit in, thus making brokenness holy. I can only imagine and let's imagine for a moment we're at the base of Mount Sinai. And there's a whole lot of brokenness going on. And we see Moses reaching down and picking up all the shards of the broken tablets and gathering those broken pieces up, each and every one of them, and placing them in the acacia wood box that eventually would also house the new, and gathering up each one of those fragments because they were holy. Oftentimes, something that was sacred in ancient culture that was broken would just be buried, to be left behind. But this was too important. This had been the work of God. This had been touched by the hand of God. And in this moment, Shevirah, brokenness, would become holy. And brokenness would live side by side by wholeness in the presence of God. It's an incredible image, isn't it? That brokenness and wholeness are not opposites, but they are side by side touching one another because they have both been touched by the divine. There are three things this week that I was absolutely just captivated by in the midst of this, that speaks to the necessity in our lives that is continuing to tell us to optimize, to be perfect, to bury the brokenness, that we don't remember it anymore, that we don't see it, but to be able to embrace the imperfection, to embrace those moments and those things in our lives that are shattered. Because each one of us have those, don't we? Each one of us have those places in our lives where one moment we were on the mountaintop, and the next we were at the bottom amongst a bunch of broken pieces of that which we thought was to be our future. I wish it was just a one-time event, but I've been on top of the mountain, and I've been at the bottom of the mountain amongst the broken pieces. But something that I found, three different things that I found in this week that was absolutely, to me, and maybe this is just for me, and so this can be group therapy, but the beauty of Shevirah, the beauty of embracing imperfection, that joy and sorrow, that brokenness and wholeness, that struggles and success, they live together. There is a tension that they're to be both together. Because of who God is and how that He is, it's made holy. That in the presence of God, when we walk in this room, and there was a beautiful, sweet presence of God here today, wasn't there? As we come into this room, we bring our brokenness and we bring our wholeness, and we offer it before the Lord, and He makes it holy. And one of the things as I read this story that I'm absolutely so excited about is the fact that God wastes nothing. God is the great conservationist. He will not waste anything. He uses it all. The fact that Moses would gather up those pieces and bring them with him, saying, I will not waste that which the divine has touched. And within this room, the divine has touched each and every one of you. Though you may feel broken, and there may be broken places in your lives today, the Lord is saying it's time to gather up those broken pieces and bring them to me because I waste nothing. We fast forward and we see in Romans, the Apostle Paul writes in Romans 8:28, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to His purposes. Now, I read this oftentimes, it's like, yes, everything's going to be good. No, that's not what it's saying. It's saying God will use all things for good. God will take those broken, shattered pieces that He wrote on, they're at the bottom of the mountain, and He takes those and He gathers those up. And He will use those for good. And in between the fragments and the shards of the tablets was something that God was going to do. And He wastes nothing. In 2010, my family and I moved from Ashland, Ohio, and we moved to Redding, California. And Redding, California was my favorite place on earth. I grew up there, and we were getting ready to go, and I was for sure that this was kind of like my launch. This is going to be my time to shine. This is going to be an amazing season that we're heading into. And as we got ready to go, it was like, I may have some interesting expectations. I was on a mountaintop experience because I had been trying to move back to Redding for 10 years. We've been trying to get back there. I'd been in Ashland, Ohio, which is, it's a place. It's a place. They say the nicest people on earth, it's written on like the water tower, the nicest people on earth live there. Not so sure, but that's okay. Blessings, Ashland. And we were heading back to Redding, California, and I was sure that this was going to be a season that was going to be another mountaintop experience. I felt as we were crossing the country, I felt like George Jefferson. For those of you who remember that, I was like, I'm moving on up. Here we go. 7 people know that. Thank you. We'll not use that for the evening service. But we're moving on up, and I'm up on this place, and as we got to Redding, and actually on the way to Redding, things start not going well. We had left Redding, and we had owned a home, and that was an incredible thing. Well, right around the time that we're leaving, they're not joking in the Midwest, the Rust Bucket. That recession is a deal. I know it didn't hit Boulder as much as it did, but it hit Ashland, Ohio with like blunt force trauma. And the economy just crashed there. And so our home that we had invested in and put all this money in was actually getting less and less. And so we had to rent it out. And we moved to Redding. It's like, that's all right. It's going to be great. We get to Redding, and the church that I'm at begins to struggle. And it's not growing. And it's actually diminishing financially and numbers-wise and going, okay, this is fascinating. I moved here to Redding. This is my time to shine. And thing after thing after thing began to happen. And finally, in 2013, Gene and Brian sent me a lifeline. I don't believe they offered me a job. They sent me a lifeline to come here. And we left Redding with a bunch of debt, a lot of disappointment, and some really depressed friends. 2 of them were on stage today. And we left Redding in this place of going, oh my gosh, this mountaintop experience. And as we're leaving Redding, it felt like that our dreams were shattered at the bottom. And one of the things for me that was happening is going, God, why are you wasting this time? I don't want to waste my time. In my mind, it's optimization and efficiency. We're just climbing up and to the right. This has got to get better. And I'm looking back, and friends, it has taken me 5 years to look back and to begin to pick up the pieces that are at the bottom of Mount Sinai of my life, from the bottom of Mount Lassen in Shasta in Redding to the bottom here of the Flatirons, to begin to pick up the pieces and going, what were you doing? What was that all about? But through the shattering of that dream and that time that I look and say, that looks wasted, it's taken half a decade to begin to look and go, oh my gosh, you didn't waste any of that. You restored friendships. You refined. You birthed new vision. You showed me that when you promise something, it's not just linked to location. That you are a God that's bigger than geography. That what you said you can do in one place, you'll do in another. I couldn't have learned that unless the tablets that he wrote were broken at the bottom of Mount Shasta. God wastes nothing. Imagine the Apostle Paul. He has this thorn in the flesh. His whole life is to live for God, to do whatever Jesus wants him to do. And he has this thorn in the flesh, whether it is a physical or emotional, whatever the ailment is. But imagine him. And we read that in 2 Corinthians, he says, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. I love this. The Apostle Paul probably had a conversation with God. I could be more efficient if we weren't dealing with this. I could do more if we weren't dealing with this brokenness. And I keep asking you, but what I'm realizing, God, this is the Apostle Paul talking, what I realize is, amongst the broken fragments of my life, you are made perfect. God wastes nothing, friends. I am sure that in each one of your lives, when you get quiet enough, there are things that have happened or have not happened that you say, God, why? This seems like a waste. I could have done more, been better, whatever it may be. What I would like you to do is to quietly whisper, God wastes nothing. He uses it all. He makes all things work together for good. Doesn't say he makes all good things. He's going to use it all, friends. The shattered places. The second thing is, in the midst and amongst the broken fragments, in Shevirah, in the most aggressive literal translation, the shattering Brokenness kind of sounds like, oh, thank you. Shattering is more like, wow, that's violent. Amongst the shattering or the breaking, a bond is created. When Moses is experiencing this situation between what Israel has done and what God is saying, there is a shattering that is going on of Moses' relationships. He's looking around and saying, God, you say you're going to leave me. These people aren't listening. What's going on again? And just for a second, Moses has got some serious abandonment issues too. I mean, this is a guy that's put in a basket and sent down the Nile. He's raised in someone else's home. After he gets there, he sees his people. He kills someone and has to flee to Midian. I mean, the guy is not connected, really. He's kind of a wanderer, a loner. And you see when he's so desperate, when God's like, I'm going to smite them people. He's like, please don't do that. I finally found my people. I don't want you to make a new group with me. These are mine. I finally found them. And he goes to God. He's like, God, and you can't leave me. If we go, if you're not going to go with us, smite me where I stand. Blot me out. But amongst the fabric and the fractures of those shards right there, a bond is created between God and Moses. God and Moses begin to talk like they never have before. The connection between God and Moses is so fierce where Moses' boldness to say, Lord, I will not go if you don't go with me. And I want these people to come with us. There is a bond that is inseparable. And one of the things that I love in this passage, as I've said over and over, I guess I'm in love with this passage. It's amazing. And it's tragic. But in the very beginning, God crafts out of stone the tablets himself, and he writes on them himself. Moses breaks them. Now the relationship's going to look different. God says, Moses, you're going to have to work for this. You're going to have to put some effort in. The bond isn't going to be me just giving to you. The bond is going to be this connection because you're going to have to craft those tablets. And so man crafted the tablets that God wrote on that would be holy. And there is this inseparable bond that happens. Do you see that? The inseparable bond. The effort of humanity and the energy of God creates something that wasn't before. And it is inseparable. And it's beautiful. That there's this bond that's inseparable. We fast forward, and forgive me, but we fast forward and we look in John 1 through 118, and it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And later it said, and the Word became flesh. Once again, it's like the tablets that were created by man and written by God. The Word becomes alive. You see, the humanity and divinity are now inseparable in Jesus. The work of humanity and the work of divinity are now inseparable with the tablets. And there is a bond that is created. And that bond was created out of brokenness through that which was imperfect. This last week, I have logged, and I'll speed up, but this last week, I logged 12 junior high and high school girls basketball games. There's a medal and a trophy they're creating for me later on that I'll get to have. But my daughter Addison and my daughter Grace, they both are playing basketball. And it's such a joy, and I find it's one of the greatest things in my life now to watch junior high girls basketball. And if you said that without having daughters in junior high, super creepy. Not if you have kids playing in the game. So I'm watching these games this week, and I'm watching Grace, who is this stout, she's my 16-and-a-half-year-old. She's this stout, strong little person. We were playing basketball last night, and she's dribbling, and she's like, try to push me over. And so she's dribbling for drills, and I'm trying to push her over, and she's just strong. Like, you don't want to say she's an ox, because that's not nice, but she's strong and solid. But 16-and-a-half years ago, in one day, I went from the top of the mountain to the bottom with some information. I've shared this before, but my wife showed up in my seminary class, and she said, I don't feel well. She's 6 months pregnant. I said, you look terrible and huge. What is going on? Never tell a woman you look terrible and huge. That is worth the price of this sermon. They rush my wife to the hospital. My wife has preeclampsia. Her body is rejecting the pregnancy. Her lungs are filling with fluid. Her heart rate is 200 over 100. Her kidneys are failing. She is beginning to shut down. And from a moment that I was really excited about, I'm like, I'm on the mountaintop. I'm going to be a dad for the first time. We haven't done the Lamaze class. I don't even know how to breathe. And now she's in an ambulance, and I'm following in my parents' car as we go to the hospital. And this incredible experience that I'm really, really excited about now, 8 days later, culminates in my wife on an operating table, them extracting what looks like a Cornish hen, which eventually is my child, from her body. This kid is tiny. She's 1 pound. She's 2 pounds. They just pull this out. I'm like, what is that? You're beautiful. It was like, I don't want to speak negative over you, but I'm not quite sure what that is. They take this thing out of my wife's body. They cut the umbilical cord. My wife is on an operating table. They're concerned for her life. They rush my daughter to another place in another room and get her into this emergency NICU unit where she's in an incubator. And I'm standing and going, just 12 hours ago, I was on the mountain thinking this is an incredible future. And now shattered in this hospital, in Akron General Hospital in Akron, Ohio, I'm looking and going, everything's broken. She's in one room, she's in another, and I'm by myself. I should be put in the psych ward at this time. But I'm looking in the midst of this brokenness. This is not perfection. This isn't what we prepared for when you have your first kid. We were getting ready, the room's ready and all of those things, and 3 months early, amongst the midst of imperfection and brokenness, grace was born. And I mean that with two different meanings. Grace was born. Because amongst the imperfection, I got to see grace. And now I have this person who's just fierce. But at the moment, I look and say, this is shattered. We've moved 10 times since Grace was born, and this little thing is like the Ark of the Covenant, the shattered, wow, I didn't think about the emotion of this. This little thing is what she wore 3 months after she was born because she was too small. Her diaper was the size of $1. Do not be fooled. Preemies can fill a diaper the size of $1 with more brokenness and shattering. We carry this around to celebrate, like the shattered pieces of those first tablets, to remind us of the beauty of brokenness. Because in that moment, a bond was created between my wife and I. And my wife and I are the most different people that are still together on the planet. We're like, what do we have in common? I'm not quite sure. But there is a bond that has been created amongst brokenness. And when I look at Grace, there was a bond between her and I because I got to watch it amongst the shattering of that which I thought was supposed to be. Does that make sense? Shevirah, the beauty of embracing brokenness. Because both the broken pieces of our lives and the whole pieces of our lives are gathered up together and they are holy. And we get to be a beacon of hope in a world that is trying to bury the brokenness. The last thing, I'm going to be really short. The band's got to come up, and we're going to be late. But hey, it's a sermon on imperfection. So what are you going to do about it? And Brian and Jean aren't here. So the last thing that I know that came out of this is that redemption is real. Redemption is possible. I'm going to skip the stories. But when Moses hears the Lord say on top of the mountain, I'm making a covenant with you before all people. I will do wonders never before done in any nation in all the world. The people you live among will see how awesome is the work that I, the Lord, will do for you. As he's standing there, Moses potentially has the broken pieces of the tablets in his hand. And the Lord is standing and saying, I'm going to do something amazing. And Moses is like, whew, that's redemption. Because things just a little while ago were absolutely shattered. I believe that with all of my heart that God wastes nothing. That through the brokenness of our lives, a bond is created with God and with others. And I believe with all my heart, as I look to the scriptures in my own life, that redemption is real. God is in the business of redeeming things. He said in his scriptures that I will replace the years the locust has stolen from you. I'm going to do something. And that's something amazing because you know what we can't get back? Time. But you know what God can redeem? That which no one else can. I will replace the years the locust has stolen. And I will bring redemption. And sometimes, you know the way God does it? He fixes things. Puts them back together. Sometimes, God makes them even better than they were before. And sometimes, it's different altogether. But I believe with all my heart, that as we look to this story, we see redemption is real. Don't we see that through the life of Jesus? We see Jesus on the cross, broken, absolutely broken. But the story doesn't end on the cross. The story ends with him conquering the grave and taking his brokenness and offering us wholeness. And that brokenness and wholeness offered together are holy. We're late, friends, but I want us to take communion because I believe this is a symbol and a beautiful symbol, a tactile thing, that as you take the bread and as you take the drink, that you feel in your hand that which is broken and that which is whole, brought together in the life of Jesus, that through his brokenness, we are made whole, and it is all holy. Let's come to the table.